John Krysinsky here, Pittsburgh Soccer Now. I've got a couple of our pals here from Pittsburgh Soccer Now, a couple of our contributors. Jordan Smith, who's been, I believe, at just about every game this year, and of course, Mark Goodman, Soccer Rabbi. Great to have you guys here. We are having a special edition of Riverhounds Roundtable because we're at that point in the season where we're not exactly halfway there, but there's a huge break, 10-day break between games. So why not now? Why not now be a good time to just kind of sit down and see where this team is? I think they're a little bit past 1/3 of the way through the season, not quite a halfway. So let's just get it going. Let's get the roundtable going. Let's do this, fire these off one at I have 5 questions. 5 questions, and Mark's ready to go. So my first question, gentlemen, is this what we've seen so far this year from the Pittsburgh Riverhounds? 6-4-3, 21 points. They're second in the Atlantic Division to the Tampa Bay Rowdies, who beat them pretty good in the opener, but then they returned to favor, beating Tampa Bay at Tampa. Is this what we expected so far from this Riverhounds team? Mark, what do you? I'll let you take it first.
Sort of. I mean, I guess I had higher expectations, and I think honestly, I expected kind of the opposite of what we're seeing, which is dumb because it's a Bob Lilly team. So I think the default position around the league, if you listen to commentators, is they think that Lilly ball is still a thing and that a Bob Lilly team is going to, grind out 0-0 and 1-0 wins. I thought the opposite. I thought that this team, with the replacement of most of the players on the back line, was going to be defensively problematic. And I think I also thought that because this team had a couple of veteran midfielders and some returning strikers, that they were gonna, and because Bob Lilly has been kind of moving out of Lilly ball and there's been more scoring, I thought that they would be a good offensive team with some real back line weakness. And I think I've seen the opposite, which is I think defensively this team has been pretty solid. They've been getting their fair amount of shutouts. I mean, Danny Vitiello is a huge part of that. He's been phenomenal in goal for us. But I haven't seen the scoring. And I think that I probably thought that this team was going to be better at scoring goals than they have been. So I guess that's where we're at. I mean, did I expect Tampa Bay to be top of the league? Probably. Did I expect us to be as kind of like soft as we were? Not so much. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Some of the lack of scoring, the 6-4-3, it's not a terrible record. They're second in the division. But yeah, I would say I'd rather see like 8-2-3. I felt like the loss against Loudoun and Austin Bold. I know Bob Lilly would probably say the same thing. He'd probably say his group should be more, couple more wins there. But it hasn't been by far a perfect start to the season. I mean, it's unfortunate. You see they win this big game against Tampa and then they lose to Loudoun. So I don't know. The team right now, it seems like they can beat anybody, but they could also lose to anybody at the same time. And it's just kind of weird. I still feel like we need more time to really feel out the team where they're at.
Okay, so 1/3, like I said, about 1/3 of the way through the season, we know what Bob Lilly has done in the past with more time, to Jordan's point. Now, you're both a little disappointed, I guess, in terms of the attack. The production, for really more than anything else. And I think they brought Albert Dequa back. Jordan Cicerone and Alex Dixon have become key pieces to that. It's almost like those three, or bringing in the Tommy Williamson, bringing in even Louis Perez, those seem like elements. So Anthony Velarde will come into the high attacking positions as well. There's some rotation there. There's some confidence building in some of those younger players. I've seen some really good things from Alex Dixon and Cicerone. Obviously, Cicerone could show he could finish. He's a never-ending motor. there's some good things there. Just relentless. But for all the good, they really struggled in the first part of this beginning of the season, just finding those goals, finishing in the final third, and playing with urgency when they're down. Seems like when they go down a goal, they were in trouble. And I would say that was the case up until the last few games. And the last few games, we've seen them play a little bit better. But one of the things he wanted to do in this offseason was rebuild this attack so that they could be more efficient in getting behind defenders, as opposed to maybe having a hold-up guy like Steven Dos Santos. So the result is Dequa's had 1 goal. I think he's had 16 shots. I think 8 on target. He draws fouls. He's had about 20 fouls. So I was looking at some of the numbers, but he's the top guy there. And production isn't really that great. I feel like Dequa and Cicerone have kind of done their part, but it just, especially in the beginning, it just didn't seem like they were clicking all on the same page. It seems like it's getting better, but I don't know. So that's in terms of production. But what are your thoughts on that? That attacking front line, and Bob wanting to be more dynamic, and what the results have been so far. Mark.
For me, part of it is I don't know what this team's identity is. I think last year with Robbie Mertz as a very classic 8 who could do some very number 10 things. And by that, I mean, an 8 is a box-to-box midfielder and a 10 is a creative attacker. Robbie was really dangerous in the final third. He was really good as a late runner. He scored his goals. He took his chances, as they say. That guy hasn't been there this year. I mean, Russell Cicerone's been really, really good in the dribble, but he's not. I don't know that he always has support. I think I might stand alone here. I'm still waiting to see, will the real Albert Dequa please stand up? Like, who is this guy? What can he do? I feel like I've seen like flashes of brilliance from him. I also feel like there's been a big opportunity for 2 years now for Anthony Velarde to come out of Robbie Mertz's shadow and be the guy. And he hasn't really, he's good. He's a solid player. But like, I think he's got gears that really he could really do some things, but they happen like once or twice a game. They need to happen like 6 to 7 times. The reliable things about this team are the reliable things about this team. Kenny Forbes sitting back and pinging those balls and just putting them exactly where they need to be, swinging in crosses where they need to be. Jordan Dover being a really, really lockdown defender. Mikael Williams has been, I think, another guy who I really, really have thought has done a nice job. The other thing about improvement is I do think, despite what I said at the beginning, that, kind of saying the defense has been solid enough. Like, I looked at the numbers, and Bob's doing this thing that he does every season where he's not really exactly sure who his like reliable guys are. If you look at the minutes for Riverhounds, all of the guys who have, so like, a full season, every game, every minute is 1,170 minutes. A lot of our defenders, Danny Rovira, Jordan Dover, Jalen Robinson, Jelani Peters, have fewer than 500 minutes. Preston Kilwine, right? Like, so Bob's been trying a lot of options in defense, and I don't think he's figured it out yet. And he hasn't found the guys that are going to contribute in both directions. So that's an area to improve, is like get a backline 5. And then back to the beginning, is part of that backline 5 or that backline 4 is an identity. Like, how are we playing? What's our lineup every week? Who's going to be a winger? Who's going to come centrally? Who's going to make late runs? Who's going to pound the ball home on, in the air? So those are still questions that are outstanding. What do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, Jordan, you have anything to add to that? I mean, there's a lot to digest there, and my head's circulating with a bunch of questions. But Jordan, I'd like to hear your takeaways on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with most of what Mark said. How you kind of pointed out how we're missing a guy like Robbie Mertz. I agree. I just, Kenny is great in the middle there. Danny Griffin as well has done a good job. Danny's been the only guy who's played every minute of the season. So fitness isn't a question in the midfield at all. But, a guy like Todd Wharton, he's a solid, I think he's more of a guy you'd want as a sub, not as your starting right midfielder. You're missing Ryan James that we had last year playing there. Clearly Ryan James would be a great addition to the lineup if you were able to have him. So yeah, I think has been great. I haven't seen him really have a bad game. Cicerone has been great as well, and Dequa, I think it's been unlucky. He's hit the post a few times, but hopefully finally he just starts finding the back of the net. I think he still just has one goal, but that assist on the Velarde goal, that was incredible. And yeah, Velarde, he's another guy that I think if the team has the depth, he's that guy he's a great sub. But I don't know where his ceiling is at. I hope he can break out. I hope he can become that full-time starter guy, but I'm still not sure if he's there yet.
Well, Mark, I know you already kind of hit on some points on my next question, which was where they need to improve. But I wanted to add you talked about, you kind of alluded on some of the, why are they not where they are? I kind of counter one thing in terms of Bob changes the lineup so much, and he expects versatility out of a lot of players. So I think maybe it takes longer for everyone to learn their role, especially the newer players in his system. Guys like Velarde and Rivera that have been now, this is their third year with this team. I think they are what they are. I think I think Rivera has shown considerable improvement even within this season. I think there's been some key things that he's done. I was looking at some key stats, and he's leading the team in tackles. Like he's one thing that they're missing. I think Jordan mentioned this. Ryan James, and last year you had Ryan James, Jordan Dover for the past previous 2 years. You could just rely on those two guys out on the width, and they put the minutes in. There's just been so much rotation on those wide, whether they're outside backs, whether they're hybrid wingers, and we just see so much rotation. You don't even know who's going to start from game to game in those spots right now. And Jordan Dover has been the only real injury problem this year. His lower leg's been affecting him. So, that's something that Jordan and I were talking before we went live here is, who's going to jump into those spots? Jordan, what do you think about that?
Well, I think probably the biggest surprise so far of the year for me has been Luis Perez. The first game that he played, he didn't look too great out there, got subbed off, but also no one looked good that game because that was the 1-0 loss to Austin Bold, where they had the ball the whole game and didn't get a single shot off on net. So you can't blame that game entirely on him. But then he was one of the few bright spots in Loudoun when they lost. And then he had the goal, and then his recent start as well. In the last home game, he was good. So I think he's a guy where Bob Lilly and his staff is probably saying like, oh, maybe this guy is legit and we can start using him out on the left wing. But yeah, they still need to figure out the back line.
He seems like a creator, more of a, I don't know. He's versatile enough to play wide. Mark,
he's one of the few guys that pulls off some nifty moves throughout the game that I've seen. So that's cool.
Mark, what are your thoughts on Louis?
But I was looking up I was looking up while you guys were talking about what position does he play, because he's played left wing like you said, but to John's point earlier, it's really unclear right now whether Bob really wants his wingbacks to be wingbacks or forwards or fullbacks, and that changes from game to game. It's like how high they press, which isn't that uncommon in soccer in general. If you're gonna say like go on the road and say, all right, the back five is a back five, right? Those back guys are really there to defend. I haven't seen Luis Perez do a lot of like really stuck in defending, which is to John's point about the tackles that Dover's making and Rovira are making on the corners. So it's like, again, back to the question of identity. You guys really both hit it really nicely, which is like, figuring out how Bob wants Luis Perez to play or whether he wants him to start or not is a big piece of that. You know, is Luis Perez the like-for-like switch for Ryan James, who was kind of a marauding left wing who also sent in those balls. You know, he sent in the early cross. He could put a guy on the dribble into the box, and then force guys to shift over so that he could make that pass backwards to Robbie to cut it, you know. And it's a good question. I mean, I think Bob is still trying to figure out who are these players that I have and how can I use them best to my advantage.
Yeah, and to add to that too, guess who's leading the team in crosses this year? It's not coming from the wing. It's Canardo Forbes.
Right.
What? Like that?
Yeah, I've seen Kenny kind of play wide out to the right. I think he actually technically started. Sometimes the formation comes out either on Foot Mob or on the broadcast for USL, and all of us go, "That's not what it is." Like that, or maybe it is. I don't know. Like, and then you'll see Kenny play in a position. He played at least once or twice this season where he played most of the game like at right forward, and I was like, what's Kenny doing over there? I don't mind the experimentation and the creativity because it's throwing monkey wrenches at teams and saying if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. But the funny thing is, like, there's no, you know, we don't have an identity yet. We don't know what the Hounds are going to roll out from week to week.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I do think they're giving Kenny a lot of freedom, and I think part of the reason why this year is you've got Todd Wharton and you've got Danny Griffin is going to be the workhorse in the middle. He's not always going to look. It's never going to be his passing accuracy is never going to be at the top of the charts. But Todd Wharton is, I think, a guy that is just very, very quiet, very under the radar. But he is going to just kind of sit back into that holding midfield spot, sit in front of the defense, and just be a reliable, not make a lot of mistakes, and just kind of be there, just kind of be a steady presence. And so I'm curious to see how that develops and evolves. Neither one of you seem to be. I haven't heard much Todd Wharton references from either one of you, but just what are your thoughts? I know he came in, from St. Louis, and he's just been a technically sound player all the way through his pro career.
I think he's like your typical utility guy, where besides forward, you can basically play him anywhere. I mean, you could put him at center mid, but obviously, Danny Griffin or Velarde or Forbes is going to be there. But I've actually noticed a few times after they've made some substitutions, especially with on the road, after they've made some subs during the game, they've used Wharton back there at in center back, like the right center back spot. And obviously he's more of a defensive out wide guy. So I think if you're saying, like what Mark was saying earlier, if you're going to have, your five in the back, if you're going to go out and say, all right, these wing backs, they're defending for sure, you'd want to use them there. But if it's a night where it's like you want your wing backs to be attacking, that's the day to use Luis Perez or Velarde instead of Todd.
Right. To Jordan's point, I think the natural, logical use of Todd Wharton would be in a 4-2-3-1 as the double pivot with Canardo. So he'll do some of the dirty work defensively that Kenny doesn't have the time to do because he's too busy pinging a 70-yard diagonal, right? Yeah. But Bob hasn't rolled that out really at all this year. And I don't really remember him doing it much in the time that I've been in Pittsburgh. He just prefers five at the back or some kind of diamond midfield or 4-3-3. It's just how he rolls. So that means that Wharton's been playing kind of like, to Jordan's point, like kind of wide right in a defensive wide midfield position, which isn't a thing. It's like usually he's got a right center back behind him, like Shane Weed or Mikel Williams. So he doesn't have a clear role. So I'm not so sure if it's the problem is that he's a sub. I think the other problem is we've got three midfielders who are really great, but they're too much alike in that Velarde and Griffin and Kenny really, really like to have the ball and can do really great things with the ball. But you guys probably know this, in soccer, you only get one ball. So they can't all do that. And the other thing is, I think maybe we should watch this. I haven't paid close attention to it, but the question of what your midfielders do off the ball to create? Like, are they dragging dudes away? So I would guess that Todd Wharton is doing some dirty work and kind of dragging guys out of position, where Velarde and Griffin aren't really going to do that as much. And Kenny's too busy. Kenny does do that well. But one of those other questions I have is, is Griffin, can Griffin and Velarde find a way of working together on the pitch in a way that accentuates both of their talents? Or is it too much of a good thing? Are they like the same guy on two sides of the field?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think Bob likes to, Griffin has been effective in a few times. I mean, both goals he scored this year were a cross that came in, not necessarily the first guy in, but maybe he makes the run to the back post. He's there unmarked, bang, he knocks it in. He takes care of what he did what he needed to do. There's some of those Robbie Mertz characteristics there in terms of box to box, getting to where he needs to be, and his work rate, I mean, is really good. I think, again, to counter what both of you are saying, I'm thinking what Bob's mindset is he thinks he has three different types of center midfielders in some respects, being that Wharton is again more technically sound, not going to be getting forward as much. Where Kenny, he can do a lot of different things. He's the veteran. He sees the game, and they play around that. And then Griffin just kind of doing the dirty work. And so that's kind of how I see it. But I think we'll see. Again, Charleston had 5 or 6 injuries. They weren't going to be high pressing or pressuring the Hounds. So they had a lot of possession. What about these games where they have a lot of possession? They're trailing most of the time. Those instances where they're trailing, they have a lot of possession. They just can't seem to get goals. Maybe they've solved that after this last result, but that's been an ongoing thing for a couple of years where they're playing up a man, they can't get a goal. They're down a goal, they just struggle playing from behind. I know it's hard at this level, but what are your thoughts on that, Mark?
The math, and I looked at some of the advanced metrics. So you guys who've read me on Pittsburgh Soccer Now or on the other stuff I've done for MLS know that I'm a big nerd for the advanced metrics, which are newish to USL because they've only recently been tracked by a website called American Soccer Analysis that I really like. Expected goals is the one that kind of speaks to John's point of like, where are the goals coming from and should they be getting more? And the answer goes back to one of the other things that all of us have already mentioned. Yes, they should be getting more goals. And one of the problems is from Albert Diqua. So Jordan made a great point of pointing out that he's been hitting the post a lot. And that's very true. The number that tells you what a guy is supposed to have scored is called XG, or expected goals. Diqua's expected goals is 3.04. And you guys probably know that he only has one goal, right? Which means that mathematically speaking, he should have a lot more. But the opposite dude is Cicerone. Cicerone has an expected goals of 3.87, and he has 5 goals. So he's exceeded expectation, meaning he's better in front of goal than your average USL striker. And Diqua, to this point, is worse than he's been. Now, one of the things about expected goals that's great is it doesn't necessarily, especially at the early part of a season, tell you whether a player is good or bad. What it tells you necessarily is whether they've been lucky or unlucky. By the end of the season, if the numbers are the same, then you know a dude is bad, right? Or maybe he's just having a bad season. But right now, I think maybe the biggest determinant in what this team can do is whether Albert Diqua is going to start banging in goals or not. Or, to be blunt, John, whether he gets full-on replaced by Tommy Williamson, which I don't think is a bad idea at this point. And I like Albert. I like giving a guy a chance. But, like, this is USL. This is this is Bob Lilly, right? Bob Lilly is a cutthroat coach who wants to win it all every season. And I'm sure the San Jose Earthquakes would be really excited to see their dude get minutes. And I think Tommy's pretty decent. It's a good question as to whether he's an everyday starter for this team. I think that's a good option, though.
he's got some swagger. I mean, he plays with the game with, he comes out, he has no fear. First game, first start, no fear. That was my impression.
Yeah.
This is what you want in a striker. I really like that about him.
Yeah, they also need a. Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Jordan. I got a counterpoint to Mark, or not a counterpoint. I wanted to say about expected goals, but go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, I'll let you guys handle the analytics, but no, yeah, I was gonna say for the set pieces as well, they got to figure it out. I think the only set piece goal was Tommy Williamson's one free kick goal, but they got like their biggest guys are their defenders on the corner kicks and the free kick chances that are close by. I don't think I've seen one goal except that free kick. So on the corners, I hate when they play short. I hate when they play a 5-yard pass and then don't even cross it in. And it's like, this is just a waste. They're missing guys like last year, like Steven Dos Santos, someone who was actually big and could get ahead on something.
Jordan, that's a great point. I definitely was going to bring that up. Yeah, one goal on set piece, but also on corners, they're just not super dangerous. I mean,
no, not at all.
Best opportunity, the Charleston game, Mikael Williams had a header that was cleared away by a defender. So, I mean, I think they just got to keep at it. I know Bob's going to spend a lot of time in training. I think he knows this. I think he's trying they need to improve in that area. I don't know if it's a personnel thing or if it's just an execution thing, but it's just not happening. And here's another thing. If Luis Perez starts to get more time, I've heard nothing but great things, rumblings about his ability to, to strike a dead ball. So that'll be interesting. You see these younger guys get those opportunities. So, so I just wanted to make sure that, I brought that up. But also, Mark, kind of the counterpoint, your part about the expected goals. Of course, before the Loudon match, you write this column, you write the preview and scouting report. This is a team that, is just completely underachieving in terms of expected goals. And then, of course, they mentioned it on the air during the broadcast. And then, of course, they came through.
I read his article.
With 2 unbelievable goals. So it's sort of like, to your point, everything sort of evens out, right?
You would hope. And shout out to Mike Watts for shouting me out. I really appreciate that, and shouting us out as the little independent website that could. So we're really happy about that. But yeah, it's the evening out thing is always the rub with expected goals. Like, expected goals is a very meaningful statistic, except when it's not. You know what I mean? Like, but I think that unfortunately, I'm going to bring up an MLS player, so hopefully people binge a lot of soccer. And for those of you who will be watching this weekend, there's a lot of soccer to binge with Copa America, the Euros, and Gold Cup all this weekend. But for those of you who binge a lot of MLS, Daniel Shallowey, who played a little bit down with the younger club, SKC2, but mostly played with the senior Sporting Kansas City. He had a season where he had the worst expected goals numbers in Major League Soccer. He was like expected to have 11 goals and he had like 0. Like he just could not hit the broadside of the barn. People are talking about him this year as comeback player of the year. He had goal of the week twice. I think he has like 6 or 7 goals in MLS. He's scoring bangers. So guys can turn around. That's the thing. And that's why, the question of like, do we keep with Dikwa or do we switch it up to Tommy Williamson is like, I don't know. But, good managers make good money for making that decision correctly.
Yeah, I think that we're going to see Bob will not be afraid to make those switches. And, maybe it'll light a fire under Dikwa or make him, a little bit perform at a little higher level when he does get his moments. And so I'm curious to see how that goes. All right. So, I think what's interesting is we had a whole set of questions, but I think within the framework of our discussion, I think you guys answered a lot of the things that we wanted to discuss. I think we've addressed what areas the Hounds need to improve. I think we've all addressed some of our biggest surprises. Any disappointments? Any disappointments so far? What stands out as a disappointment to any one of you? Either one of you.
I had high hopes for Josh Gatt to be Josh Gatt's return to soccer greatness, because he was playing at an MLS level. He was a U.S. men's national team call-up a long time ago, had a number of knee injuries. He played for Molde in in Europe and, who are a perennial Champions League team and was good for them. That was a lifetime ago, though. And I don't think his problems this year have anything to do with injury. I wonder if they have to do with his mentality, that he's moved around a lot. He didn't lock himself in as a starter in the lineup, and as a former national team player and an MLS player, maybe he thought like he was going to walk into the starting lineup. And I think John and Jordan, you both knew that like that wasn't going to happen with Bob Lilly. Like Bob Lilly gives everybody an equal shot, whether you're a rookie out of Lehigh or whether you're a former MLS starter. And so I think that Josh hasn't risen to the challenge. He hasn't quite figured out what his role in this team is. I think that's one big area of disappointment for me. Do you have any thoughts, Jordan, on a way in which the Hounds have been disappointing?
Yeah, well, we've talked about Dequa enough. We've gone through him, so that's cleared up. But I would say I'm not disappointed in Danny Griffin, but I'd like to see more assists on the stat sheet for him. I mean, you can't complain too much about the guy. He's played every minute of the season. So obviously he's going to be a bit more defensive when he's playing all those minutes. He can't go up in the rush every single time. But yeah, I would like to see some more finishes from him and just some more crosses, some more passes out there. His passing percentage, I think it's up there on the team. It's like above 75% completion. But yeah, I mean, I'm just nitpicking after we've gone through Dequa and you talked about Josh Gad, but yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
one area of disappointment, I wouldn't say it's great disappointment because I think he's been great, is in goal. Danny Vitiello, there's always those goals that, you might give up that are questionable. So I think I'm sure he's his own self-critic and maybe clean some things up on some of those. When he comes out, he's got to be sure he doesn't overrun the ball. That's what happened in the last, from my perspective. I'm definitely not a keeper's coach or know the technical parts of it, but he's also been so good and solid, made some really great saves. In some games in some of the games earlier in the year when they looked like they were a little overmatched at times. But I think the competition at the goalkeeper spot, with the fact that Jake Leakers is right there, I think definitely adds to the intrigue. And it will keep Vitiello, I think, on his toes through the course of the rest of the season. I don't think he started the season as a sure starting keeper. He's still the starting keeper. I think he's, but now Leaker will get his opportunities in those every other, they're not going to have as many weekday games, but I think it'll just be interesting to see how the goalkeeper position evolves and how Vitiello, if he can clean up some of those mistakes he's made, a couple of those mistakes, then I think he'll be good. Any with like quick thoughts on goalkeeper spot, Jordan?
I've only seen Leaker play once myself when I was down in Loudoun, and they gave up 2 goals that game, but I would not say that game was his fault. I believe he had 5 saves on the night. But yeah, Video probably would like to see a few of those back. It happens, especially that own goal between him and Wheat that happened that one game we were at. It happens, but yeah, I don't think they have too much to worry about at the goalkeeper position throughout the season. Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap things up here, guys. You kind of parting thoughts as the Hounds kind of enter the middle part of the season. What's the ceiling for this team? How far can they go? Can they? I mean, we know they can beat Tampa on the road at Tampa. We know that they can beat quality teams, but can they put it together? Can they really put together, long winning streaks? Can they really push to the top of the table and stay there?
I think second place in the Atlantic Division is a good aspirational spot. I mean, I think they're unlikely to be as good as Tampa Bay. And I also think end of season into the playoffs, that kind of slot is roughly about where they're good at. Meaning they're a Eastern Conference semifinal, Eastern Conference final type team. That's their ceiling. Their floor as a team is being kind of mediocre the rest of the way, getting into the playoffs and going out in the first round, which is a story we have heard over and over again, which would probably kill Bob. I mean, he would just be so ticked off because the dude has to rebuild the team every year. And I'm sure he finishes up rebuilding. He's like, this is it. This is the year. I finally got the guys that I need to do it. And then it's the same story as last year. That's where I think we're at. We're not the best team in the league. We're in the top 4 in the East overall. We're maybe in the top 8 of teams in all of USL. But that probably isn't going to be good enough to get hardware. I would love to be wrong, though.
Jordan?
Yeah, I'd love to be wrong too. I kind of have the same opinions as you, Mark. I kind of feel like it is, as I see it right now, a first round exit kind of team, maybe the second round. I don't know. I felt like last year's team was going to be the team to finally break through. And as far as I see right now, I felt like last year's team was so great defensively that, like, with Venkaize and other guys in the back, I just knew that if they were going to give up anything, it'd be one goal, if that. So I thought last year's team was going to be the team to break through. I don't think it'll be this team this year, but we'll see. I think, yeah, second place in the division would be pretty good for them. I think if they're third or less than that, that's going to be a disappointment for Bob.
Yeah, and I kind of feel the same way as both of you. I think they're meddling. They're kind of there. It's